Why was everyone ignoring her at the table? The map stretched wide across the briefing board, red circles scrawled where the suspected cache might be. Fingers pointed, voices layered over each other, tactical jargon filled the air. But no one turned toward her, not once. She sat in the far corner, back straight, pen in hand. Her uniform was the same as theirs, her patch no less earned, her seat no less deserved. Yet to them she was background noise, an afterthought, a support officer tagging along. She didn't move to correct them. The commander's baritone rumbled over the room, steady as stone. Intel suggests movement around the valley ridge. Drones confirm shadows, but resolution's poor. Could be a small patrol, could be bait. Boots scraped, pens tapped, low murmurs traded. One officer leaned forward, jaw tight, offering a suggestion about timing. Another cut in, arguing for more air cover. Their words were sharp, decisive, certain. Her pen moved silently over the page, but not with the same broad strokes they used. Her notes were different. She mapped patterns, not positions. Silences, not chatter. Shadows, not just figures, because she knew sometimes the truth was in what wasn't said. And still none of them asked. The commander circled a red mark with his thick marker. This is where we believe the weapons are staged. Remote compound, 2 clicks past the ridge. We'll breach at night, approach low, split teams. The others nodded, scribbled. One officer chuckled, making a low comment about another sandhole in the middle of nowhere. Laughter followed, short and rough, like gravel rolling downhill. Her hand stilled. That sound, it cut. Not because of the arrogance, but because she'd heard laughter like that before. Once, just before everything went wrong. She blinked slow. The memory pressed forward, heat blistering against her skin, a scream carried on the wind, a rifle cracking far too close. A hand had slipped from hers into the dust, the silence swallowing it whole. Her fingers curled against the page, gripping the pen until her knuckles whitened. But her face gave nothing away. One officer at the edge of the table noticed the faint sound of her tapping pen. He shot her a glance, irritation flashing in his eyes. He muttered something to the man beside him, just loud enough for her to catch. Dead weight, a smirk, a shake of the head. Her jaw tightened. She didn't respond, not yet. The commander's voice cut through again. We leave at 200, gear ready, comms checked, rest while you can, we move as one. As one, the irony stung. Chairs scraped, bodies rose. Boots thudded across the concrete floor, the sound fatting into the echoing hall. Their voices lingered, laughter bouncing like it belonged. She remained seated, pen still against paper, waiting. Only when the room emptied, when silence finally claimed the space, did she move. She gathered her notes, folded them carefully, and slipped them into her pocket. Her movements were measured, quiet, intentional. She walked the corridor, passing the mess where soldiers clustered around trays. Forks clattered, voices overlapped, jokes, curses, tired sighs. She didn't stop. She didn't belong in their circle, not tonight. Her path led her elsewhere, to the armory. The door creaked as she entered. Cold fluorescent lights buzzed above, flickering every few seconds like tired eyes refusing to stay open. Weapons lined the walls, each locked and labeled with precision. She moved to one particular locker, her steps soft, steady. She keyed in the code she wasn't supposed to know. A quiet click released the latch. Inside lay a rifle, black, sleek, not standard issue, modified, precise. Her fingers hovered above it for a moment, trembling not from fear but from memory, from weight. She lifted it carefully, the strap sliding across her shoulder with a familiar pull. The metal pressed against her palm like an old truth she couldn't escape. She closed the locker, the click echoing through the empty room. For a moment she stood still, eyes closed. The smell of oil and steel lingered in the air, sharp, metallic, grounding. And beneath it all, her silence spoke. She wasn't just here for the mission. She wasn't here for recognition, or approval, or the shallow respect of men who smirked at her presence. This was personal. But they didn't know that, not yet. She walked back through the dim hallway, rifle at her side. Each step was soft, but in her chest the weight of her heartbeat thundered. She reached the barracks, the rows of bunks lined with weary bodies. Some slept already, boots still half-tied. Others stared at ceilings, lost in their own thoughts, their own ghosts. She lowered herself onto her bunk, set the rifle carefully against the wall, and leaned back. The mattress was thin, the air stale, the hum of the lights constant. She pulled her notes from her pocket, unfolded them, and studied the lines she'd written. Patterns, shadows, timings. Theirs was a map of movements. Hers was a map of truths. Her gaze shifted to the man across from her, already half asleep. His hand twitched occasionally, a reflex of old fights he never fully left behind. He once told her he had a wife back home, someone who sent him letters scented faintly of lavender. He carried them everywhere, folded so many times the edges frayed. Another man 2 bunks down still wore his boots to bed, said he didn't like the feeling of being caught unready. His eyes darted in sleep, like he never escaped the battlefield. She saw them all, not as dismissive men, not as arrogant voices, but as humans cracked by duty, trying desperately to hold the pieces together. And herself, she was no different, only her cracks ran deeper, hidden under layers of silence. Her mind drifted again, back to the valley, back to that scream, back to the dust that swallowed the sound. Her hand clenched the paper tighter. Not this time. A sudden thud jolted her boots hitting the floor. The commander's shadow filled the doorway. He scanned the room, eyes sharp, commanding. 0200, be ready. His voice was low, but it carried. No hesitation, no doubt. Then he left, the echo of his steps fading. She folded her notes again, sliding them back into her pocket. Her hand lingered there a moment longer, pressing against the fabric, as if anchoring herself. Tomorrow night they would walk into that valley. They would see shadows. They would hear silence. They would think they knew what awaited them. But only she knew the truth. And she hadn't told them, not yet. She lay back, eyes open to the ceiling. The hum of the light blurred into the steady beat of her heart. Sleep would not come, but that was fine. She didn't want dreams tonight. Dreams carried memories, and memories carried screams. Instead, she closed her eyes not to rest, but to steel herself. Because when dawn came, when boots hit sand and the valley swallowed sound, she would no longer be the ordinary figure in the corner of a briefing room. She would become the extraordinary daughter of unbroken duty. And no one would see it coming. Why did the silence feel heavier than the dark? The night was still except for the whisper of boots brushing sand. The air was sharp, dry, tasting of dust. The desert had its own language, one only the patient could hear, and she listened. Her squad moved in a staggered line across the valley floor, shadows folding into shadows. Radios crackled occasionally, clipped words traded like currency, but mostly silence. The kind that pressed on the chest, that reminded you how alone you were, even in a group. She adjusted her rifle strap, eyes scanning every ridge, every broken rock. The moon hung pale and thin above, a slice of light that gave no warmth. Her breath stayed slow, steady. She counted it in her head. Inhale, exhale, control. The commander signaled with a clenched fist, halting the line. They crouched low, sinking into the dust. His voice whispered through the comms. We split here. Alpha circle left, Bravo right. We meet at the ridge. The men nodded, some eager, some wary. Boots shifted, weapons checked. She stayed silent. A sergeant beside her gave her a look, as if still surprised she was here. His jaw worked, chewing on words he didn't bother to say. She caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the subtle shake of his head. She ignored it. The teams divided, shadows peeling off in separate directions. She stayed with Bravo, following the faint outline of the commander's back. Each step forward was swallowed by sand. each movement muffled by the desert's endless patience. The valley stretched wide, broken only by jagged rocks that rose like teeth. Somewhere beyond, the compound waited, silent, hidden, watching. Her eyes traced the horizon, searching for shapes that didn't belong, a shadow too still, a glint where there shouldn't be light. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with knowing. There was something out there, she could feel it. Her mind flicked back to the briefing, red circles on a map, laughter at the table, their certainty that this was just another cache, another sweep, another sandhole. They didn't know. She did. The ground sloped upward, forcing them into a crouched climb. Gravel shifted beneath boots, stones skittering down the incline with faint rattles. Every sound felt too loud, too exposed. She steadied her movements, distributing her weight carefully, refusing to let the earth betray her. At the top, the commander froze, raising a hand. The line halted, breath held. Through her scope she saw it, the compound, a low structure half buried against the ridge, corrugated metal, worn walls, faint lights blinking at intervals. And movement. Two figures packing, slow, tired, routine, but still armed. The commander whispered into comms, 2 on watch, rotate every 10, simple patrol. Simple. Her stomach tightened, too simple. She shifted her scope slightly, scanning beyond. Her eyes caught something, a flicker, not from the patrol, from the ground itself. A shimmer, faint, almost invisible. Tripwire. She didn't breathe. Her finger hovered over the comms button. She should say it, call it out, warn them, but something held her back. Would they listen, or dismiss her again? Her silence stretched, the moment thick. She thought of the smirk at the table, the muttered word, dead weight. She thought of the hand slipping from hers, dust swallowing the scream. Not again. She pressed the button, voice low, steady. Wire, 2 meters past the South Patrol, don't step. The line froze, eyes darted. She could feel them doubting, questioning. The sergeant near her scowled, whispering back, where? I don't see. But then the commander's voice cut in, firm, certain. She's right, hold position. The squad exhaled as one, relief hidden in the quiet. Her chest eased slightly. The commander had seen it too, or maybe he'd simply chosen to trust her word. Either way, it mattered. The patrol moved on unaware. The wire lay untouched, waiting. The squad shifted again, moving wider, slower. Each step now carried more weight, more awareness. As they circled closer, the desert air thickened. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was alive, listening. She felt it pressing against her skin, crawling beneath her collar. Her heartbeat quickened, but her face stayed calm, her movements precise. They reached the ridge overlooking the compound. From here, the view stretched clearer. The building squatted low, shadowed by the cliff. Faint voices carried on the wind, scraps of foreign syllables drifting like smoke. The commander crouched, gesturing them down. He studied the compound through his scope, jaw tight. 2 outside, unknown inside, no heavy fortifications. We breach its signal. Breach, the word echoed cold. Her fingers tightened on her rifle. She scanned windows, doors, the edges of walls. Shadows flickered, too many for the numbers they expected. Her gut twisted. This wasn't routine. This was something else. But again she stayed silent, for now. The sergeant beside her wiped sweat from his brow, muttering under his breath. Same old game. Get in, clear, get out. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. She glanced at him, catching the tremor in his hand. Not fear, fatigue, the weight of too many same old games stacking inside him. Her gaze softened. Even arrogance cracked when ghosts pressed too hard. The commander raised his fist, the signal. The squad tensed, fingers curled around triggers, breaths held. And in that suspended heartbeat, she remembered. The last valley, the scream, the hand slipping away. Her throat tightened, not again. The fist dropped. The squad moved. Shadows spilled down the ridge, boots pressing into dust. The patrol below turned too late. Two muffled shots, clean, silent, bodies dropped. Her rifle stayed steady, her scope locked not on the fallen but on the windows. Shadows flickered inside. Movement, more than expected. Her voice almost broke out, "Wait, stop," but it was too late. The first door burst open. Figures spilled out, weapons raised. And the silence shattered. Gunfire erupted, sharp, deafening. Dust exploded upward, sparks flew from stone. Voices shouted in fractured bursts, orders swallowed by chaos. She dropped flat, rifle pressed into her shoulder, scope finding targets. One breath, one squeeze, a figure fell. Another breath, another shot, precision, calm inside the storm. Around her, men scrambled, firing wild. The sergeant cursed, his weapon jamming. Someone screamed, a sound too close, too human. Her chest burned, not this, not again. She crawled forward, eyes locked on the compound's dark mouth. More shadows surged from within, endless. This wasn't a cache. This was a nest. Her breath caught, she'd known it, felt it, but too late. Her finger hovered over the comms. She wanted to shout it, to cut through the chaos. But the words lodged in her throat, heavy with the weight of disbelief she'd faced before. Would they listen? Would they trust? A bullet snapped past her ear, the air searing. She flinched, teeth clenched, but steadied. No choice. Her voice cut through the comms, sharp, unshaken. It's not a cache, it's a trap. The silence that followed was only a breath long, but it felt like an eternity. Then the commander's voice, hard, certain. Fall back, regroup at ridge, now. Boots pounded, dust swirled, gunfire roared. She covered their retreat, each shot a shield, each breath a promise. They scrambled back up the slope, bodies low, lungs burning. The compound spat fire, but they moved, driven not by orders, but survival. At the top they collapsed into cover, breaths ragged, weapons clutched. The commander's eyes met hers across the dark. For the first time, his gaze held something more than command. Respect. But her chest didn't ease. Because she knew this wasn't over. The desert didn't forgive, the night didn't forget. And she had just become the reason they were still breathing. But no one yet knew why she had recognized the trap so quickly. That secret still lay buried, deep, unspoken. And soon it would demand to be told. Why did survival feel heavier than death? Dust still hung in the air like smoke, thick with the taste of gunpowder. The ridge sheltered them for the moment, but echoes of gunfire rolled across the valley, chasing their breaths. Each man crouched low, gripping his weapon as if it were the only thing tethering him to the earth. She sat pressed against the jagged rock, rifle balanced across her knees. Her pulse hammered against her throat, but her breathing was steady, deliberate, measured. Years of training had carved control into her bones. The commander crouched a few feet away, scanning the darkness with sharp eyes. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white against his rifle. He wasn't panicked, he never panicked, but even he hadn't expected this. No one had, except her. The sergeant cursed under his breath, slamming a fist into the dirt. Intel said cache, not a damn fortress. His voice shook with rage, but beneath it was fear, raw, heavy. Another soldier muttered, "We lost Harper, we lost him." His words cracked, barely audible, but they sank like stones. The name hit the air and stayed there. Harper. A laugh, a voice, a brother in arms now silenced in dust. No one moved. No one knew how to fill that kind of silence. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Not Harper, but another name, another face, one she carried deeper than anyone here would ever understand. The scream, the slipping hand, the dust, always the dust. Her jaw tightened. She forced the memory back into its cage where it clawed at her from the inside. Not now, not yet. The commander spoke, his voice low but hard. This was deliberate. They wanted us in that valley, wanted us boxed in. No one argued. Then his gaze flicked to her, sharp, searching. "You saw it first," he said quietly. "Not a question, a statement." The sergeant bristled. "She just got lucky. Wire could have been anywhere." The commander didn't flinch. "Luck doesn't see what trained eyes miss." The words hung in the air, heavy, shifting something subtle in the group's silence. Her own chest tightened, not with pride but with conflict. This was the moment she could speak. She could tell them why she knew, why she'd seen the signs, why she'd felt the trap before it sprung. But the words stayed buried, because once spoken there was no pulling them back. Instead, she said nothing. The commander studied her for another beat, then nodded once. "We move, quiet, North Ridge, regroup, then we reassess." The squad rose, weary but obedient. Boots scuffed the dirt as they slipped back into the night. The desert stretched endless ahead of them, stars scattered like broken glass across the sky. The moon had dipped lower, casting long shadows that swallowed their figures whole. Each step forward was heavy, not just with exhaustion, but with loss. Harper's absence trailed them like a phantom. Every breath carried the weight of what they hadn't said to him, what they never would. She walked near the rear, eyes scanning constantly. Her rifle was steady, her stride even, but inside, her chest burned. Because she had been here before. Not this valley, not this squad, but this weight, this silence, this unspoken grief that clung to every soldier who kept moving because stopping meant breaking. The night air grew colder. The ridge loomed ahead, jagged and unforgiving. They climbed in silence, muscles straining, breath shallow. At the top they found a hollow cut into the rock, sheltered from the wind. The commander signaled them down. They sank into the dust, rifles close, shoulders heavy. For a long moment no one spoke. The desert hummed around them, alive with the faint whisper of wind, the distant echo of what they'd left behind. Finally the sergeant broke. His voice was hoarse, raw. "We weren't supposed to walk into a damn hornet's nest. Intel was wrong, or someone lied." Another soldier muttered, "Or someone wanted us dead." The words hung, heavier than any bullet. The commander's jaw flexed. He didn't deny it. Her fingers tightened on her rifle. Lies, intel, traps, all of it carved too close to old scars. She thought of the briefing, of the smirk, of the laughter, of the certainty that this was routine. But she had known. And still she'd stayed silent too long. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak now, to tell them the truth, that this valley wasn't just another mission for her, that she carried knowledge none of them had, that she'd seen traps like this before, lived them barely, that the scream still echoed in her bones. But the words stuck, because once spoken they wouldn't just change the mission, they would change how they saw her. And she wasn't ready. Not yet. The commander finally spoke. "We hold here until dawn, then we move, carefully, no assumptions." His voice cut through the doubt like steel. "We don't bury anyone else in this valley." The squad nodded, weary agreement in their eyes. One soldier leaned back against the rock, pulling a worn photo from his pocket. A woman, 2 children. He stared at it in silence, thumb brushing the creased edge. His breath hitched once, almost imperceptible, before he tucked it back. Another pulled a flask from his vest, taking a slow sip before passing it down. No words, just ritual. These moments, the small, human ones, were what she watched most closely. The flickers of vulnerability that made soldiers more than uniforms, more than weapons. Because she knew those flickers didn't last, the desert swallowed them quickly. She adjusted her rifle, settling into the dust. Sleep wouldn't come, not for her, not in this place. Her eyes traced the horizon, scanning for movement. Every shadow was a threat, every silence a question. And beneath it all the memory gnawed, the scream, the slipping hand. Her chest ached with the weight of it. She pressed her palm against her thigh, grounding herself. Not again, not this time. The hours dragged, heavy with waiting. The men shifted, some dozing in fitful bursts, others staring into the dark. The desert never slept, neither did she. When dawn finally cracked the horizon, the light was pale, weak, as if reluctant to touch this valley. The sand glowed faintly, cold and indifferent. The commander rose, stretching stiff muscles. His eyes swept the squad, then the ridge, then her. For the briefest moment his gaze lingered, not questioning, not doubting, just considering. She met it steadily. Then he turned, voice low, "We move." Boots rose, gear adjusted, weapons checked. The squad fell into formation, weary but alive. As they descended the ridge, the valley stretched before them, endless and unforgiving. She walked near the front this time, her eyes scanning, her breath steady. The silence pressed heavier now, filled with ghosts. And inside, the truth clawed at her throat. Because she knew something none of them did. And if she stayed silent much longer, it could cost them all. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. The hum of the aircraft engines pressed against her skull like an endless drum, but her eyes refused to close. Across from her, men with hardened faces slumped against their gear, mouths slightly open, helmets tilted forward. They could sleep anywhere, on metal floors, against concrete walls, even under the thunder of artillery. But she wasn't like them. Not tonight. Why was her heart still racing when nothing had even begun? She glanced down at her gloves. The leather creaked faintly as she clenched her fists. They still carried the faint, bitter scent of gun oil mixed with sweat. She rubbed at it as though scrubbing away a ghost, but some ghosts never left. The green interior light shifted as turbulence jolted the plane. She felt her breath quicken. A whisper of a voice filled her head, her father's, stern yet strangely tender. "Don't flinch. Don't let them see it." She swallowed, holding the words like armor. But inside she was flinching, hard. The lieutenant beside her finally broke the silence. First time. His voice was low, but the question carried an edge of curiosity, even doubt. She hesitated. Lying would be easier, but she said softly, "Not the first." His brows lifted. He looked again, as though reevaluating her presence on this flight. But he didn't ask the second question, the one everyone wanted to. How many missions? How many kills? How many times had she come back while others did? Instead, he nodded, leaned his head against the bulkhead, and closed his eyes. The plane dipped again, groaning like some tired beast. She exhaled slowly, letting her thoughts drift to a different night, desert wind scraping her cheeks, the bitter sting of sand in her eyes. She remembered a man's hand trembling in hers, a comrade bleeding out, his breath shallow, his voice ragged. "Tell my kids," he had tried to say, but the sentence never finished. She had held his hand long after the warmth left it. She squeezed her eyes shut now. That memory returned every time she boarded another mission. The guilt had become a silent passenger, buckled in beside her, whispering reminders of everything she couldn't fix. The pilot's voice broke through, calm but precise. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And then the questions she dreaded would begin. Could she keep her hands steady? Could she silence the noise in her head? Could she make decisions fast enough, clean enough, before lives hung in the balance? She forced her shoulders to straighten. Duty was heavier than fear. She learned that too many times. One of the men across from her, a sergeant with a scar running down his jaw, leaned forward. "We're heading into a nest tonight. Intel says maybe 50 hostiles, maybe more. Locals are unreliable. They always are." He looked at her directly, voice blunt. "You freeze, we die." The words landed like lead. She met his stare, her voice firm despite the tension in her chest. "I don't freeze." The scarred man studied her for a long beat, then leaned back. A small, approving grunt was the only reply. But inside, her stomach twisted. What if he was wrong about the numbers? What if the locals weren't just unreliable, but bait? The cargo light shifted again, this time to red. They were close. She reached inside her vest, fingertips brushing a folded scrap of paper tucked in a waterproof sleeve. She never read it anymore. She didn't need to. The words were burned into her. her mother's handwriting uneven from illness. Don't forget who you are, even when they try to make you something else. Her throat tightened. She looked down, forcing herself to take one deep breath, then another. The ramp lowered. A howl of wind and dust filled the space. And for a brief second, as boots thundered toward the open night, she hesitated. Just enough to feel the pull of two worlds, the one she left behind and the one she was about to enter. Her voice whispered inside, "Don't freeze. Don't let them see it." But she wondered, what if this mission wasn't about them seeing her at all? What if it was about her finally seeing herself? The night swallowed her as she stepped off into the storm. And already the unease in her chest told her something about this mission wasn't what they'd been told, not even close. Would she discover it before it was too late? Why was it so quiet? The team fanned out, rifles raised, eyes darting. Every shadow felt alive. Every flicker of light in the distance could be friend or foe. She tightened her grip on her weapon, scanning rooftops, windows, alleys. Her pulse beat in her ears, but her training forced rhythm into her breath. The scarred sergeant gestured sharply, directing them toward the compound ahead. It loomed out of the darkness, cracked walls, a half-collapsed roofline, a gate hanging by one hinge. Intel had claimed this was a weapons depot, but to her it looked like an abandoned shell. Still, appearances lied. She knew that too well. As they crept closer, she caught a flicker of movement, a curtain twitching just for a second. Her muscles tensed. She aimed, breath caught. But when the window stilled, no one else seemed to notice. She lowered her rifle slowly, unease gnawing her gut. They stacked along the wall. The lieutenant, calm but tight-jawed, whispered into the comm, "On my go." She felt sweat bead under her helmet. Her finger hovered, steady yet trembling with invisible weight. The door splintered open, shouts, the crack of boots on concrete, and then nothing. Empty. The rooms were bare, save for broken chairs, dust-covered crates, and a few rusting cans. No rifles, no ammunition, no signs of 50 armed hostiles. Her chest tightened. It doesn't fit at all. Clear, someone muttered. But her eyes lingered on the far wall, symbols etched into plaster, foreign script, and beneath it something else, a child's drawing. Crayon lines of a house, a son, a family holding hands. She stared, throat dry. What was this place? A base or a home? The sergeant kicked a crate, frustration breaking through his composure. Intel was trash again. His voice dripped bitterness. We're ghosts in a dead zone. But she wasn't convinced. The quiet wasn't safety. It was a pause, a held breath, the kind that came before impact. She pressed her hand to the wall, fingertips brushing the rough chalk lines of the drawing. Why did it feel more like a warning than a remnant? "Raven," the lieutenant called, her call sign. She turned sharply. "Watch the east door." She nodded, moving into position. The hallway smelled faintly of kerosene, of something burned but not gone. She steadied herself, listening. And then there it was, a scrape, faint, deliberate, metal against stone. She froze. Her comm crackled. "Raven, report." Her mouth was dry. She whispered, "Not alone." And in that second the building exhaled, a sound like a sigh or a warning. Then the first shot rang out. Her body jolted as dust exploded near her shoulder. She ducked, adrenaline flooding her veins. Figures surged from the shadows, eyes glinting, rifles raised. The air erupted into chaos, gunfire, shouted commands, the metallic clatter of magazines slamming into rifles. Her heart hammered. She squeezed the trigger, rounds cracking into the darkness. She wasn't sure if she hit. She wasn't sure of anything but survival. The sergeant's roar cut through the noise. Ambush, fall back. But there was no clean retreat. The east door burst open, more shadows pouring in. She pressed against the wall, vision narrowing. Every sound sharpened, the snap of bullets, the grunt of a man hit, the sharp intake of breath beside her. And then time slowed. A child's cry. High terrified too close. Her rifle faltered. Her eyes swept left. In the corner of the hallway, a small figure cowered, eyes wide, hands over ears. Not a fighter, a child. Her throat closed. The world demanded a choice. But her duty, her promise to herself, whispered just one truth. Extraordinary isn't about what you destroy. It's about what you protect. Her finger eased from the trigger. And in that single heartbeat of mercy, she realized the mission wasn't just compromised. It was a trap, one designed to test not her aim but her soul. The child's cry was not the accident she thought it was. It was the signal. She had seconds, maybe less. The child's cry was still ringing in her ears when the hall erupted into fire. Muzzle flashes tore the dark, illuminating the cracked walls in bursts of white light. Dust and plaster rained from the ceiling. The team was pinned, forced into cover that was rapidly crumbling beneath the hail of bullets. Her breath caught as she pressed herself against the wall, every nerve screaming for action. The child, so small, fragile, was still crouched in the corner, frozen by fear. She wanted to reach out to shield them, but the rational side of her brain clawed back control. Not now, not yet. Survive first, then save. Her rifle snapped upward, firing controlled bursts. She caught a glimpse of a figure collapsing in the distance, weapon clattering against the floor. Another ducked behind cover, their return fire ricocheting sparks inches from her cheek. But the numbers, God, the numbers were wrong. She counted at least 20 already, shadows flanking, circling, and that was just here. How many more outside? The scarred sergeant bellowed into his calm, voice drowned by chaos. This was a setup. We're compromised. Request immediate. His words cut off with a sharp, guttural sound. He crumpled, clutching his side, blood spreading fast across his fatigues. Her heart clenched. "Sergeant down," someone shouted. She dropped low, instinct pulling her toward him. Her hands pressed to the wound, trying to stem the tide. His eyes locked on hers, glassy with pain but still burning with urgency. "Forget me," he rasped, spitting blood. "Get them out, that's an order." Her throat tightened. Duty. Always duty. But how many times had she heard that same desperate command, spoken by men who never saw another dawn? "I won't leave you," she whispered back. His lips curved into a grimace that might have been a smile. "Then you'll die here." The world around them shook with another volley. She gritted her teeth, forcing her hands to steady, forcing herself to think. Her calm buzzed in her ear, the lieutenant barking orders, but the words blurred into static. The child's whimper, the sergeant's ragged breathing, the endless rattle of gunfire. These sounds consumed her. She closed her eyes for a split second. She thought of her father again, his voice low, the way he used to test her resolve. "When you're cornered, girl, you don't fight the corner. You make a door." Her eyes opened, sharp with clarity. They couldn't win this fight. Not here, not like this. "Smoke out," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. Grenades clinked against the floor, hissing plumes swallowing the hallway in thick gray clouds. Vision vanished, but so did the enemy. Shouts echoed in confusion, footsteps scattering. She hauled the sergeant upward, his weight crushing against her shoulder. Every muscle screamed, but she pushed on. She wasn't strong enough to carry him far, not alone. But leaving him wasn't an option. Not this time. Not ever again. "Raven, east exit, move." The lieutenant's voice cracked through her earpiece. She stumbled forward, dragging, pulling, half carrying. The child was still huddled in the corner, tiny frame shivering in the smoke. For one fleeting second she considered passing by. Too dangerous, too much risk. But her chest burned with defiance. What good was survival if it cost her humanity? She crouched, one arm holding the sergeant, the other reaching for the child. "Come on," she whispered, voice urgent but soft. "We're leaving." Wide eyes met hers. Trembling fingers slipped into her glove. That fragile trust anchored her more than any mission order could. Together they pushed through the haze, her lungs screaming for air, her ears ringing from close bursts of gunfire. The exit loomed ahead, broken doors, moonlight spilling through. But the trap wasn't done. A silhouette appeared in the frame, tall, broad, calm, rifle leveled directly at her. Her body froze. Behind her the sergeant groaned. Beside her the child whimpered. Every choice collided in that instant: duty, compassion, survival. Her finger hovered over the trigger, but hesitation gnawed. If she fired, she risked hitting the child. If she waited, she might never fire at all. Then the figure spoke, a voice that chilled her blood. "You shouldn't be here." Not an accent, not foreign, American. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Drop it," the man ordered, stepping closer. His uniform was wrong, patched, mixed, deliberate in its disguise. But the way he moved, the calm in his eyes, he wasn't some local fighter. He was trained, military. Betrayal sank like ice into her gut. Intel hadn't been wrong, it had been corrupted. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice raw, hoarse. He tilted his head, almost curious. "The question isn't who I am, it's why you're still alive." Behind the smoke, more footsteps closed in, shapes gathering, surrounding. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from rage, from the realization that this mission was never about weapons or intelligence or even territory. It was about them, her team, pawns on a board they didn't even know they were standing on. The man's voice dropped lower, almost kind, almost apologetic. "Orders are orders. You weren't meant to walk out of this one." Her mind reeled, the sergeant's blood on her shoulder, the child's small hand in hers, the lieutenant's voice still calling through static, unaware of what awaited outside. She had seconds. But within those seconds, she found clarity sharper than fear. Her father's words echoed again, steady as stone. "Don't flinch. Don't let them see it." Her rifle rose, smooth and silent. And for the first time tonight, her voice was steady. "You'll have to shoot first." The man's eyes narrowed, his finger twitched. The child's grip tightened. The sergeant's weight pressed heavy. And then an explosion ripped through the wall behind them, shaking the earth, swallowing the hallway in fire and thunder. The choice was stolen from her. But the fight was just beginning. The blast had thrown her to the ground like a rag doll. Dust choked the air, filling her throat, stinging her eyes. The child's cry cut through the ringing in her ears, sharp and desperate. She blinked hard, her vision swimming. The world was fire and smoke. The hallway collapsed into a jagged mess of rubble and steel. Her first instinct was simple: move, get them out. Her body ached, bruised from the impact, but her mind forced clarity. She pushed herself up, coughing, heart hammering. The sergeant lay sprawled against the wall, groaning, blood soaking deeper into his uniform. His eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. "You still breathing?" she asked, voice raw. "Barely." His attempt at a smirk faltered. "But I'll complain later." Relief stabbed her chest, short-lived, fragile. She grabbed his vest, dragging him away from the fire eating its way through the hall. The child followed close, tiny hand clutching her sleeve, face streaked with dirt and tears. But then the memory came back, the man at the doorway, his calm words: "Orders are orders." He hadn't been swept away by the explosion. He was still out there, watching, waiting. She couldn't see him now, couldn't hear him over the chaos, but she felt him like a shadow pressing against her spine. The calm in her ear crackled back to life. "Raven, report. Raven, do you copy?" It was the lieutenant, still fighting, still unaware. She pressed the earpiece, her voice low, deliberate. "It's a setup. Inside compromised. Unknown hostiles, American-trained. They want us buried here." Static, then silence. Then his voice again, harder, colder. "Confirm." "Confirmed," she whispered. The pause that followed carried the weight of shattered trust. Then the lieutenant's voice came back, grim. "Get out. Regroup North Ridge if you can." If her jaw clenched, survival was no longer just about the mission. It was about choosing who she would carry forward and what she would no longer leave behind. She looked at the sergeant, barely conscious, and the child clinging to her. One soldier, one innocent, both depending on her, both slowing her down, both worth more than her own life. She shifted the sergeant's arm over her shoulders again, feeling the hot stickiness of his blood seeping through her sleeve. Her knees buckled under the weight, but she forced herself upright. "We move," she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. The night outside was worse than the hall. Flames licked the sky, sending columns of smoke twisting upward. The compound was alive with movement, shadows darting, weapons firing, figures shouting in languages she half understood. She crouched low, guiding the child ahead of her, dragging the sergeant step by agonizing step. Each breath was fire in her lungs. Each footfall felt like it could be her last. Gunfire cracked nearby. Voices shouted commands. She froze, heart pounding. A patrol passed just feet away, 3 men, rifles slung, scanning. She pressed herself and her small group into the rubble, praying the smoke would cloak them. The child trembled against her side, breathing too fast, too loud. She cupped a hand gently over the small mouth, whispering without sound, "Breathe, just breathe." The men passed for now. But the sergeant was fatting. She could feel it in the way his body sagged heavier, his breath shallower. He murmured something, words slurring. She bent closer. "Don't waste this," he rasped. "Don't waste me." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to shut up, to save his strength. But what strength? He knew. She knew. Some wounds couldn't be carried past the night. Her throat burned with words she couldn't afford to say. Instead, she whispered, "I won't." His hand weakly squeezed her arm. Then his eyes slid shut. His breathing slowed, shallow but still present. She kept moving. She had to. The compound's edge loomed ahead, a broken wall half cratered just wide enough for escape. Beyond it lay the dark sweep of the ridge. Safety, distance, a chance. But as she neared it, a figure stepped into view. The same man, the American, calm, rifle at ease, as though he'd been waiting for her. Her breath caught. He looked at her burden, the sergeant bleeding, the child clutching her side, and his lips curved into something almost sad. "You really don't get it, do you?" he said softly. Her rifle raised, shaking with rage. "Then explain it." He didn't flinch. He didn't even aim back. He just studied her like she was some puzzle piece that didn't fit. "You're not supposed to save them. You're supposed to let them fall. That's the point. That's the lesson." Her skin crawled. Whose lesson? His silence was louder than an answer. Behind him, more shadows gathered, silent, waiting for his signal. The weight of the sergeant pressed on her. The child's fingers dug into her sleeve. Her pulse thundered in her ears. For a moment she felt the crushing inevitability of it all. Betrayal. Death. Another name etched into memory, another innocent swallowed by war. But then something in her broke, or maybe it finally mended. Her father's voice, her mother's letter, the countless faces of the fallen. "Don't forget who you are, even when they try to make you something else." She lowered her rifle slightly, not in surrender, in defiance. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You want me to choose between them, I won't. You want me to break, I won't." The man tilted his head, studying her like a teacher disappointed in a stubborn student. "Then you won't last." "Maybe," she whispered, "but neither will you." And in that instant the lieutenant's voice crackled in her calm, sharp and urgent. "Raven down." Gunfire split the night. The man's calm face disappeared in a burst of sparks as a sniper round clipped his rifle, forcing him into cover. The air erupted with chaos again, shouts, fire, scrambling. She seized the moment, dragging the sergeant through the gap in the wall, pulling the child with her. They tumbled down into the dirt of the ridge, rolling, scraping, lungs burning. Behind them the compound exploded into a storm of noise. But ahead, darkness, open ground and the faint silhouette of allies breaking through. She lay there for a moment, chest heaving, dust filling her mouth, the weight of 2 lives still pressed against her. And for the first time that night, she felt something she hadn't dared allow. Hope. It was small, fragile, easily broken. But it was alive. And so was she. For now. But somewhere behind the smoke, in the shadows of betrayal, the man was still alive too. And he wasn't done with her yet. The desert was quiet, too quiet for a battlefield that had seen fire and fury only hours before. Smoke still curled from what remained of broken armor and burned-out hulls, drifting toward a sky that seemed too serene for the carnage below. Alina stood on the ridge, boots half buried in the ash-laced sand. The wind tugged at her torn fatigues, lifting strands of hair matted with dust and sweat. The rifle across her chest felt heavier than it ever had before, not from weight, but from memory. Every pull of the trigger, every body that had dropped because she had chosen not to hesitate, had etched itself into her bones. But it wasn't the victory she carried now. It was the names, the voices, the faces of those who had marched beside her and those who never made it back. She whispered them under her breath like prayer beads, as if reciting them could anchor them in the world of the living. Because to Alina, letting their memory slip into silence was the true death. Her calm crackled faintly, static, then a voice too weary to command yet still steady. "Lieutenant Marquez, status." She pressed the mic, her eyes still sweeping the charred valley below. "Holding position, ridge secure, but the unit is gone, sir. I'm the last one here." There was silence on the other end, long, heavy, and cruel. Finally, her commander's voice came back, softer. "Copy, stand by for evac." She clicked off. Her legs trembled not from weakness but from the realization of what evac meant this time. There would be no squad climbing aboard with her, no after-mission banter, no quick smirks of relief, just her, a survivor by default, not by choice. As the sun dipped lower, Alina's shadow stretched across the ridge. She found herself staring at it, that lone figure standing where dozens once had. Her mind drifted back months, years, to the day she first marched. She hadn't joined for glory. She hadn't believed the recruiters' slogans or the medals gleaming on parade uniforms. She had signed her name because she couldn't stomach forgetting. She had seen what happened to soldiers who came home, only to vanish into the background of a nation too distracted to care. The forgotten voices haunted her, and she swore she would carry them, amplify them, live for them. Now, standing here, she realized fate had twisted that vow. It hadn't given her the luxury of carrying voices. It had left her drowning in them. The evac ship thundered in the distance, a deep hum vibrating across the valley. Dust spiraled into the air as the dropship descended, its belly doors opening wide. Alina did not move. She simply watched as the ship hovered, as the dust storm grew, watched as the silhouette of salvation waited for her to climb aboard. Her chest rose and fell. She thought of leaving. She thought of survival. She thought of how easy it would be to vanish into the system, to retire as the last survivor of the mission. The reporters would eat it up. The medals would arrive in velvet boxes. The speeches would paint her as a hero. But the truth was rawer, sharper, less convenient. Heroes don't walk away because they're the only one left standing. Heroes don't accept survival as enough. Heroes carry forward what others cannot. She turned from the ship. The pilot's voice crackled through the loudspeaker. "Lieutenant, this is your ride. Move, soldier." Alina took a long breath. Then, gripping her rifle tighter, she shook her head. She clicked her comm back on. "Negative, I'm not done here." There was confusion on the line. Command voices scrambled, warnings spat out, threats of court-martial. None of it pierced her resolve. She began the descent into the valley. Her boots crunched against broken glass and scorched stone. The smell of burnt oil mixed with iron lingered in the air, each step echoing louder than the next. When she reached the first fallen soldier, she knelt. His tags were half melted, the name barely legible. She touched them gently, whispering his name. She moved on to the next, and the next. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in bruised twilight. Still, she moved among them, gathering fragments of stories, pieces of lives, preserving them not in metal tags or digital logs but in her heart. Because that was what she had promised. She marched for the forgotten. She carried the weight of silence so others didn't have to. And though the galaxy might try to forget, she would not let it. The dropship finally pulled away. Its engines thundered into the night, leaving her in the darkness, lit only by the cold shimmer of distant stars. Alone, yet not alone. She stood in the center of the valley, rifle slung across her back, eyes raised skyward. The voices pressed around her, not as torment but as strength. She whispered, not to the sky but to them. I will not let you fade, I will not let them erase you. You live in me, you march in me. Her words carried on the wind. And as she began walking, step by step, into the unknown horizon, there was no music, no applause, no banner of victory, only the quiet rhythm of boots against earth. But it was enough, because Elena did not march for glory. She marched for the voices the world tried to bury. She marched for the silence that demanded remembrance. She marched because forgetting was worse than dying. And in that march, in that quiet defiance, the forgotten finally lived again. End of story.